And Brandon, before we finish out the podcast, gotta say, make sure to check out mostvaluablepodcast.com to catch MVP each and every day. Your one-stop shop to get everything that MVP does, mostvaluablepodcast.com. And Brandon, let's start our last segment, and it's another NFL drafty segment, but this one is because of somebody who is going back. Now, Mark and I did a segment when it happened about what it means for the draft that Justin Herbert is going back to Oregon. What I want to ask you is, will Justin Herbert regret this decision? And the thing I want to say before somebody gets angry, because I know someone in the comment section of the Onside Kicks video said this, is one of the reasons he is going back is because his younger brother, who's a 4-star tight end, Patrick Herbert, has committed to Oregon. So that's a little bit of a part of this. Wants to go back, not just play for the school, wants to go and play for his brother, who it would be like when I was talking to Dave about it, Dave goes, well, is he on the offensive side? Because Dave's like, if he's a defensive player, it makes no sense because you're not throwing to your brother. But he's a tight end. So we could see a Herbert to Herbert connection at the next level. But I want to ask you, draft-wise for Justin, is he going to regret this decision, let's say 5 years down the line? Look into your crystal ball. Is he going to regret going back to Oregon and not coming out for the 2019 NFL draft?
If he gets hurt, he's going to be really pissed. But
again, because he's had a little bit of an injury history.
But if he does not, and as long as he doesn't have the type of season that... You remember Jake Browning?
Remember Jake Locker? Like, that's another one. Speaking of Washington quarterbacks.
Yeah, yeah. Because Jake Browning, 2 years ago, he had such a who's that? He had such a good season a couple of years ago. This past year, he comes back and just, I mean, nothing. He did nothing of relevance. I don't see Herbert doing that because I see Herbert leaps and bounds ahead of Browning. But
he even played in the Red Box Bowl.
Wait, they had bowls outside of the 2 games that mattered?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. The Red Box Bowl, Brian. I was blown away when I saw the Red Box Bowl.
Okay, I actually one broadcaster, and it may have been Joe Buck actually, that said it really weird. He said the Red Box Bowl.
Yeah, that's weird.
The Red Box Bowl. The Red Box Bowl.
What was
weird? It was weird. It was very strange.
The weirdest thing about that
game
was how Oregon was in it and they only won 7-6. That was the weirdest part.
And that is why you shouldn't watch bowl games because they're boring. But here's the deal: is that no, I do not. As long as there is no awful injury that ends his season, that keeps him out multiple games, I think he's going to be just fine. I think he's going to be happy with his decision to go back because he really has an opportunity here now to prove anyone who was saying, oh, well, he's good, he's really good, but he's got a couple of things he's really got to work on. Well, now he can work on those couple of things. And now he's able to come out the next year, hopefully a better player, a more growth. I think that he is going to be happy with this decision. And he's still going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the class. He is. He is. He still is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the class because it's not going to be, Trevor Lawrence is not going to be in the class. We talked about it a little bit already. Yes, Tua is going to be in the class. But I still think that Justin Herbert is going, the 2020 class could be similar to the class we saw this past year, where we saw Baker and we saw Rosen and we saw who else was there? Why am I blanking on it? Darnold,
Baker, Rosen,
Lamar Jackson. It could be very similar.
Josh Allen.
It could be very similar to that. And honestly, outside of the Cardinals, everyone seems to be happy with what they've got. Buffalo, they've got a really good one, I think, in Allen. A bit of a sleeper, but I think they've got a good one there. Lamar Jackson is going places with the Baltimore Ravens. He just does.
I can't stand the people that were like, oh, why didn't Joe Flacco get put in the game? Because he's not the future. I just had to get that off my chest.
Duh.
It really bugged me when people were like, why didn't Joe Flacco get put into that game? Because he's donezo. He's been donezo. It's Lamar Jackson's time.
I mean, I can't even begin to try and tell those people why Joe Flacco didn't get put into the game. We'd be here a long time.
Yeah.
But you got Sam Darnold that has really bright future for the Jets if they put any pieces around him. Obviously, Baker Mayfield is looking really good for the Cleveland Browns, and their future looks very bright. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really good things going on for those teams that drafted those quarterbacks. I don't see that necessarily being too far off in 2020. That's all I'm saying. I mean, why are you so worried? Why are you so worried?
Because and this is me. I am, first off, like you mentioned, how he's still going to be, to me, a first-round pick next year, unless he gets, like, devastatingly injured. But the thing I look at is how many times have we seen this book before? Jake Browning, not even talking about him now. You've got Jake Locker, who would have been a higher pick if he came out after his junior year compared to when he did. Matt Barkley probably would have been a number 1 overall pick if he came out after his junior year instead of going back for his senior year. Because here's what I look at, and this is like, it fits with Justin Herbert, because a guy like Andrew Luck can go back to college because there was nothing wrong with his game. Like, Andrew Luck would have came out as a junior, would have been the number 1 overall pick. He went back, still was the number 1 pick. We had the suck for luck was basically the whole thing going on that year. Justin Herbert is not that guy. And he is not the Andrew Luck, the Cam Newton. He's not the guy that I can step into any draft class and be the number 1 overall pick in that draft class. Hell, in this draft class, that was a weaker draft class, he wasn't like, just let's take a look for a second. When Justin Herbert was still technically in the draft discussion, how many articles did you see about people asking, oh, would a team trade up to number 1 for Justin Herbert? Didn't see a single one. The second Dwayne Haskins declares for the draft, and yes, it's also because Justin Herbert's not in the draft, the first thing you see today, boom, Mel Kiper has an article, will he be the number 1 pick? Why, we just talked about, will he be the number 1 pick? Now, that also goes into, it's a weak draft class, but I look at it and I go, he's not, I'm going to say Andrew Luck caliber. He's not the guy that can step into any draft class and be the number 1 overall pick. Also, I will take this example too. Although he will probably be the 3rd quarterback on the positional rankings for next year's draft, today when first things first, asked Joel Klatt about next year's draft, he mentioned 2 quarterbacks. He mentioned Tua, he mentioned Jake Fromm. No mention of Herbert, which I was even like, really? You're not even going to mention Justin Herbert?
I'm not going to lie to you. If you're going to mention Jake Fromm, you better darn well mention Justin Herbert.
But in most mocks right now, like even I'm looking at WalterFootball.com, their quarterbacks, the first one off the board, number 1 overall, Tua Tagovailoa. Number 2, second pick, quarterback, Jake Fromm. The next quarterback then off the board is Justin Herbert. Like, most people are looking at it, Tua, Fromm, Herbert, as of right now. And I look at this and I go, there's a part of me that's like, I get it. You want to play with your brother, that's fine. Like, I'm not bashing him for wanting to go back, play for the school, play for his brother, because I've always been a proponent of go back to school, get your degree, finish that, and the NFL will be waiting there for you. But
except in this situation.
Well, this situation, it's a little bit different because I look at it and I go, there's not that certainty. First off, you bring up injury. He's a guy that 2 years ago had an injury. He's a guy this year had an injury. There might be a little bit of a history there. Yes, none of them have been like severe, like, hey, season ending, injuries, but if you've had one the last 2 years, who knows if you're going to have one this year. Plus, look at the kind of game that he plays. It's very much like, I remember talking to you on this podcast after diving into some film when we first looked at Justin Herbert, and I said he reminds me of Cam Newton, like Cam Newton light, because Cam Newton has obviously got a bigger body and is more athletic than Justin Herbert, but he plays with that same style, which there's going to be some wear and tear when you're running and taking hits as a quarterback. But I feel like in this situation, and I might sound like a hypocrite from what I usually am, I look at it and I'm like, you mentioned Jake Browning. I mentioned Jake Locker. I throw out Matt Barkley. I've read these books before.
But are they anywhere near what Justin Herbert is? Yes, you've read some shitty books. We all have.
I would say...
And those guys, maybe they just were never destined to be good in the NFL. That happens. It happens all the time. Hence, if I was the Arizona Cardinals GM, I'm looking for players, not picks.
And I mean, that's just what I'm saying is Matt Barkley is probably the only one that is like Jake Locker probably just had a really good junior season. But like Matt Barkley, many thought that it was like, okay, like he is number one pick. He's the top quarterback in this class. Went back and like
he was horrible when he went back,
and that was
his senior season was
and
horrible.
That was another thing too, is like you mentioned, and it's a real yin and yang thing here, is you mentioned, oh, he's going to go back to school and work on what he needs to work on. You're looking at the positive. To bring up the other side, maybe to play devil's advocate a little bit, it also gives these draft scouts a whole nother year to look at you compared to two other prospects that some scouts might look at them more highly than you, and by comparison, might look at your flaws as more of a negative than they did this year. Like this year, I don't want to say it like this, but here's the thought that's coming to my head. It's like being I can't even get the analogy right, so I'm not even going to say it. But basically, it's like being the prettiest pig in the show. Is basically compared to this draft class. Look at this draft class for quarterbacks. We're bashing it every second we can get. So, of course, he looks like a great quarterback in this draft.
Which draft class?
This one. The one we're currently in. Like Haskins, Greer, Daniel Jones. Like, he looked like the number one quarterback.
I'm not bashing it. You're bashing it.
I'm saying across the board. Like, everyone's saying defensive draft, quarterback. We're already looking. If you're a quarterback guy for drafts, you're looking to next year. Hell, at the national championship game, this draft class was so bad quarterback-wise, they're even talking about Trevor Lawrence in 2021. Like, that's what we're getting right now. And I just look at it and, like, I fear that this year he's the number one quarterback, 7th overall pick. Next year, he might be a late round first, which might not be bad because he might go to
Lamar
a playoff
Jackson
team.
Was a late round first pick, and look how it's turned out for him.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's the opportunity for me to be wrong, but also I just look at it and I wonder if you'll look back at it and go, man, I wonder what would have happened if I was in this situation compared to the one that I'm in. But of course, hindsight's always 20/20, and you can't read the future.
Let me say this. Let me read something to you from SI.com. Quote, he has all the tools, all the traits, end quote, says one AFC exec. Quote, he's a bigger Marcus Mariota to me. He could use another year in school, another year of maturing, but I could definitely see him going high just based on talent and traits if he came out. He could see him going high just based on talent and traits if he came out now. Just based on talent. If he goes back, if what needs to happen does happen, if he stays healthy, if he does not regress. I'm not saying he needs to get leaps and bounds and, oh my gosh, he's a new person. I'm not saying that. But if he can at least build a little bit upon what he did last season, next year isn't going to be this lost draft for the guy where no one talks about him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just because you go back means you're going to all of a sudden be worse and no one's going to want you when you come out. Just because your name wasn't Andrew Luck. And it happened, and Andrew Luck went, he was so good, everyone wanted him. He went back, he was so good, and everyone still wanted him. I'm not saying, of course, he's going to be a number one pick, but I'm not saying that we should count him out of next year's draft class just because the poor chap is going back to college.
What do you mean by counting him out? Like, completely?
You're acting as though he's going to go from, like, the number one pick to second round pick. I mean, that's how you're acting, and I really want to know why you're acting like that, because you think it's as though the Matt Barkley is going to drop by and with his wand, put a curse on him that he's going to suck ass in his senior season.
Well,
I really want to try and get, and it's a scary place to go, inside your head, Ricky, and try and figure out why you think that because you're going back for your senior season, that I understand all the things. People are going to find out a little bit more about you. Sure, yeah, of course, that's what happened. But why are you thinking that automatically he's going to be worse? And, I mean, who's to say that Jake Fromm is going to be... We looked this past year and said Jake Fromm should have been replaced by Justin Fields at some point. That's how crap Jake Fromm was this past year. Georgia fans...
I never said that.
I did. Either hold it or bring it on while you think I'm right. If you don't think I'm right, really, I don't want to hear it. But this is the thing, is that it's not a foregone conclusion that these guys are going to be in front of him. I mean, Tua looks pretty good right now, even with his bad game in the national championship game. It wasn't him. It was just Alabama as a whole. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out, with everything that Justin Herbert has, and if he is able to build on this past year, and if he is able to correct some of the things that he needs to correct and mature as a quarterback, I don't know how that can be necessarily seen so much as a negative.
For me, I look at it where maybe the Jake Locker and the Matt Barkley situation, that might be the extreme one side. But I also look at this. Look at last year's draft class. We had how many quarterbacks in that draft class? 5. All of those 5 teams are not looking for quarterbacks this year. This year, we've got teams looking for quarterbacks. I'd say the Giants would take one. The Jaguars are going to get their quarterback either in the draft or they're going to get Flacco or Foles. Like, they're going to get a new quarterback one way or another. They're going to get it. You either have, also Miami could be in the quarterback hunt. You've got Denver that could draft a quarterback. Like, there's so many teams this year that I wonder next year, and this is me looking into the future, what's that quarterback class, what's that quarterback needy team going to be? Because I look down, Arizona, I still think they'll be on the Rosen train. The Niners have Jimmy Garoppolo. The Jets have Sam Darnold. Oakland, I'll put an asterisk by them because it seems like John Gruden doesn't like Derek Carr, and Derek Carr doesn't like him, it looks like. Tampa, I'll put an asterisk because Jameis Winston will be an unrestricted free agent after next year.
And he sucks.
Looks like the Giants will get a quarterback this year. The Jaguars will get a quarterback this year. Matthew Stafford is the quarterback in Detroit. Josh Allen, Denver. Okay, they could be one because Case Keenum is up. You've got Andy Dalton in Cincy, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, Miami asterisk. Okay, there's 3 teams. Matt Ryan, no. Washington will probably get a quarterback this year because they absolutely need one. And then the rest of the playoff teams like Cleveland, Minnesota, Tennessee, Steelers.
Tennessee, I would put an asterisk by.
Well, it depends on when they
Minnesota,
get off the Mariota train.
If they give it another year and it doesn't seem to go too well, I put an asterisk there as well. I think that there's every single year, really quickly, is look at this past season. the Denver Broncos signed Case Keenum, thinking, okay, Case Keenum is going to be the guy for us because look at what he did last season.
And then he wasn't the guy.
And then he wasn't. How many times does that happen?
A lot.
That's happening year in, year out, all the time. You look at all 32 teams, there's always probably going to be 5 to 7 teams per year looking for a quarterback. There are. One way or another, they're looking for a QB. Either there's a bad injury over here, or this guy completely just tanks, or over here it just never worked out. There's always going to be teams looking for quarterbacks. I am never bothered by that. Always.
Here's the thing, and this is my last thought on it, is so Matt Barkley to me is the extreme. Him and Jake Browning are the extreme. Of like, because Matt Barkley, if he came out his junior year, would have been a first-round pick, top fiver, maybe at first overall. He came out after his senior year and was a fourth-round pick that year. Whereas Jake Locker was still the 8th overall pick. I just look at it for Justin Herbert. And, of course, what team he lands on counts. Because if it's a Lamar Jackson situation and he lands in a good situation like the Ravens, or what if Herbert gets taken by a playoff team or a team close enough where it's like, hey, we're winning games, but we're kind of on the cusp of the playoffs where it might be a good, like a Steelers. Let's say Big Ben finally retires after next year and the Steelers go after him and they go, Mason Rudolph is not the guy. We're going to take Justin Herbert. I look at it, and of course, and I'm going off of overalls, he could have been the top quarterback in this class, taken it in the top 10, wouldn't have fallen past the Giants. If he was still in the draft class, we would probably be asking if a team would trade up with the Cardinals to get him at number 1. And I just fear that, and this is me just looking negatively at it, I fear that we might look at him and go, man, if he would have came out in this weaker draft class, he would have been in a better situation than being the 3rd quarterback off the board because teams were going to take Tua and Fromm ahead of him.
And now
I know,
how I would...
And I know you're not sold on Fromm ahead of Herbert.
No. And now how I would look at it is he could come out this year and potentially, with yes, being a good quarterback, not having that final year where he could have been able to develop a couple other things, fix some issues here, there, whatever he needed to do, and he could look like Josh Rosen. Struggle. Or he could go back for his senior season, come out the next year, and look like Baker Mayfield. Yes, it's comparisons that aren't necessarily 100% on either side. But what I'm saying is you can tell offensive line or not, good or bad, good, bad, or whatever. Baker Mayfield is here. Rosen is here. It's easy. You can easily tell that. There's so much more confidence with Baker Mayfield. Rosen doesn't know where the hell he's throwing the football. That's what I'm saying. Maybe a year does that. Maybe a year changes that for Herbert. If he comes out now, great. You get great money. You're a top 10 pick. But are you going to be as good as you possibly could be for that team right now? Or is it going to take you longer learning curve to get everything down? Or, again, everything has to go well, but you go back for your senior season, you come out, and you are the best possible version that you possibly could be coming out of college for the NFL.
The only thing I'm going to say, and this is my argument no matter what, when you talk about when they say, oh, could stay in school, that only depends if you're going to go to a team like the Jaguars, where it's like, we need you to start day one. Where, look at Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was drafted. He sat behind Brett Favre. Like, I could have saw Justin Herbert drafted by the Giants. He sits behind. They bring Eli back for another year because Eli did not do terrible. I mean, he did have a terrible offensive line.
They got rid of Eric Flowers and everything seemed to be better.
And guess who picked him up? the Jaguars, so they might be looking for a left tackle like Jonah Williams in the NFL draft. But I mean, I look at it and go, I could have seen him going to New York. Good situation. He sits behind Eli for a year, and it's always the yin and yang of like, I get the college thing and I get what people are going to say. He's got a connection to Oregon. He's from Eugene. His brother's coming. I get it. And I can't bash that. That is not what I'm bashing, because I love that. And that's why I love college sports, because you have that. Like the fans that come in here and watch our podcast, listen to our podcast, have connections to the schools they went to. And that's what makes college football special. I am talking about it from a draft perspective and where he could have gone this year, to where I look at it and when like the scout says, oh, he goes back to school and develops, yes, he'd be playing actual games and developing, but I think he could still do the same sitting behind an Eli Manning in the pros, where the biggest, and this is the devil's advocate to that point, is that when you're a pro, you don't got to worry about classes. All you got to worry about is football, football, football. And that's all he has to worry about in the NFL. It's like, it's the biggest thing I hear out of Dave's mouth in NBA draft time is, oh, he doesn't have to worry about going to classes. You just got to worry about playing basketball and hitting the weight room and getting better. And like, that's the devil's advocate to it. But I get he wants to go play with his brother. He's going to be a tight end, so they're going to be on the same side of the ball. He wants to go back to Eugene. He's from Eugene. I'm not bashing that. I just wonder if we're going to look back on it, and only time will tell on this, but I wonder if we'll look back on it and go, he should have came out earlier. He should have came out. But yet again, time will tell. Will that happen? Nobody, like, we don't know. It could happen. It could not happen. We could even look back and go, man, good thing he stayed, because he went to the right team this year. Could you imagine if he would have went to the Giants? Like, that would have been a catastrophic situation. We could even say it that way. So, I mean, nobody has the magic answer. This is just me kind of like a worry that I have with it, and just kind of very therapeutically talking about this. Any final thoughts that you have about this situation?
No, I mean, I think it's always interesting to look at these situations, because we never know. We never know. We're not
Justin Herbert.
We can only guess and say.
Which, Justin, if you're listening, because I know you are, if you ever want to come on the podcast and talk, you're always welcome to come. Or if you know Justin Herbert personally, because apparently the Nasir Little, we had a guy who is friends with Nasir's cousin. If you know Justin, tell him he is welcome on the podcast. I would love to be able to sit down with Justin Herbert and talk to him.
For Nasir Little's case, if anyone knows Roy Williams, tell him to actually play him the right way. No, I just think it's always really interesting to be able to talk about this, because right now we're talking, and we've talked, Dwayne Haskins could be just the next greatest thing. Mm-hmm. What if he's not? What if he's not in the NFL? We don't know.
And that's what I'm saying.
We have no idea.
I'll tell it this way. If Dwayne Haskins was in next year's draft class, he might be the third. If he's behind Justin Herbert now, if he was in next year's draft class, he would be the fourth best quarterback, not the first best quarterback. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's the whole reason why I have this worry, is because Justin Herbert could have came out, been the top dog in this class, and gone to a team like the Giants, compared to going to a team where you have to sit behind a veteran, or going to a team where it's like, oh man, our guy, we like going to Denver right now until they change everything. I wouldn't want to go to Denver, because it seems like a bad situation. Like, remember Paxton Lynch, how high I was on him? Mm-hmm. Went to Denver and he shit with the shadow of John Elway over him. Like, it was just not a good situation for him in Denver. But any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No.
Is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. Am I over-exaggerating? Is Justin Herbert going to be fine? What do you guys think? Will he regret the decision? Will he not? Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. Thank you guys for checking out the podcast. Thank you for Brandon for being back. It's nice to have you back from sabbatical.
It was fun. It was
fun. We can actually talk college sports yet again. We're going to be diving a lot into draft and a lot of different things now with football being over. We can kind of look at this stuff. Make sure to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/mostvaluable podcast, and rate and review the podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys for watching on YouTube. I know you're looking at our logo. Camera turned off, and I'm at the end, so I'm just going to let the logo play. But thank you for watching us, and thank you guys for listening to us on podcast services around the world. But for Brandon Swanson, this is Ricky Widmer, and as always, have a good day, everybody.